Our next question, I've decided to put a number of questions together because they're generically dealing with the same thing. So we have Sister Rashida from Birmingham, asks that she works in the healthcare industry, but in her hospital it is mandatory to wear scrubs, which at times might be too tight. And also it is the policy of their hospital that the forearms be exposed so that the gloves can come to the forearms. So she's saying, what can she do in this regard? Is it permissible? I want to add some more questions here. Brother Ma'moon writes that when the Quran says to lower the gaze, what level of prohibition is this of the opposite gender? Is it a complete, blanket, unconditional prohibition, or is it prohibited only with desire? Because he writes, when one is in the corporate setting, it is not possible to always lower the gaze. And in the course of normal interactions, one looks and smiles and offers polite conversation. So does this verse apply to that? And Brother Raza asks about alcohol being present in corporate events and meetings, and a number of other questions. So all of these questions, I want to give a generic response to working, let's call it the fiqh of the workplace, the fiqh of corporate environments.
وما أرسلنا من قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون.
Now I want to begin by stating that we need to distinguish between that which Allah has forbidden specifically because of itself, what we say haram li dhatihi, and that which the Sharia has forbidden because it leads to haram, haram li ghayrihi. So generally speaking, we all understand that there's one thing that is haram li dhatihi, and there are many things that's haram li ghayrihi. So classic example, zina, that is haram li dhatihi. But what leads to zina? It is the lustful gaze, it is flirtation, it is being alone with a woman. All of these are also haram. What is haram li dhatihi? Drinking alcohol. But what leads to that? Selling alcohol and transporting alcohol and being in the presence where alcohol is consumed. And not all of them are the same level, by the way. I'm giving you some random lists here. Obviously each of these is a different category in sin, but the point is that there are things that are forbidden in and of themselves, and then there are avenues that Allah Azza wa Jal wants to shut, because when you open this door, you're just gonna go all the way until you get to this actual sin. And so we all know, for example, that all fahisha, it starts with the lustful gaze and the lustful talk. So then obviously we should stop it from the very beginning. Still, the means do not take the same rulings as the ends in terms of sins, and therefore, and this is well known especially when it comes to buyu' or transactions, and I've spoken about this in other lectures, that which is forbidden indirectly, that which is forbidden not because of itself but because it leads to haram, it may become discouraged, makruh, or strongly disliked depending on the circumstance, and so the sin will not be there, but the karaha will remain. And so here we get to this reality, this awkward reality, and I brought this up quite a few times, and I don't like to have to mention these types of things, but what can one do in this regard? That the internet has made fatwa shopping just like a buffet. You can find anything. And it is very common to find many groups of scholars, especially from lands far, far away, lands that are themselves, going through their own issues. But anyway, that's besides the point. That you will find websites, that answer Q&A of Islam, that pretty much make everything blanket haram. Like literally, there's hardly anything except that haram, haram, haram. And the fact of the matter is that many people love these fatawa, and when I or others come along and try to dig through and make some things makruh and haram and whatnot, even though I quote other ulama, doesn't matter. There is a huge, backlash and liberalization, and you're a sellout and this and that. And generally speaking, the people who are of this ilk, generally speaking, there are particular demographics, and I'm sorry to say this, they're young males. That's generally the case. And they are ultra strict in their ideal utopia, but that's not the way the world works. And these fatawa, they might be popular in terms of YouTube links or viewers, but they are simply ignored when it comes to actual Muslims living in and working in the workplace here in the corporate side of things. And they have no relevance to the lived lives of people who are working in the workplace in all Western lands, dare I say even in Eastern lands, but let's not go over there. So the point is that when fatawa simply become non-viable, and when a fatwa becomes utterly meaningless for all practical purposes, then firstly, those who love such fatawa should open their eyes and smell the coffee, as the saying goes. And secondly, it becomes obligatory on those people of knowledge or students of knowledge like myself to really then chime in and say with utmost respect to our ulama 3,000 miles away, 5,000 miles away, we have to ask them to mind their own societies, and we have to speak to our peoples. How many people come to me in the corporate office? And by the way, FYI, I have also dabbled, as I've said multiple times, in the corporate world, and I have worked in the corporate world for a while. And also when I was in academia, and I'm still in academia, it's not as if academia is separate. We also have to do, things that people in the masjid communities or shuyukh who live separate maybe not fully understand or realize. So my point being that with humility and respect, I say that I am fairly familiar with that type of environment, and those who have never lived or worked it, it is much easier for them to be idealistic and to give these very nice sounding fatawa that resonate amongst college kids who have never worked, and resonate amongst people who would like to see such a world but don't inhabit the real world, but it doesn't resonate with the people who are actually working in the office themselves. So I'm going to bring up a number of issues here that we should be aware of. First and foremost, that perhaps the most important is that our fuqaha have discussed something that is called ma'ammat bihil balwa, that which everybody in society is doing even though they should not do it. And that when an evil or when something that is makruh becomes the norm, the shari'i ruling has to be adjusted in light of the norm for people who interact with that. And this is a lived reality that nobody can deny. Again, may Allah protect all of us. I have to always point out that this reality of criticizing and refuting people of knowledge and people of training by people who haven't studied or trained, it has caused so much damage in the social media, and people are so confused. But the fact of the matter is that this is a real issue of fiqh, a real issue of the scholars of Islam that they're well aware of, and that is when an evil becomes commonplace, you cannot expect to apply the exact same ruling than when the evil was not commonplace. And there are specialized treatises and books written. There's dissertations written about this issue of ma'ammat or mat'amad bihil al-balwa. And no doubt, when our scholars discuss these issues, they too need to fear Allah and not open up the floodgates. But still, let us be realistic here. We're living in a society at a time and a place where the rules of hijab do not exist in the Western world. Frankly, even in the Eastern world, they do not exist. The rules of, in the Western world, alcohol is rampant everywhere. In every gathering almost, or in every business meeting or whatnot, people are drinking. If you wish to live in these lands, and by the way, it's not as if going somewhere is going to solve all of these problems. You're going to have another set of problems. There is no utopia anywhere in the world. If you wish to work in corporate lifestyles, you're going to be exposed to things that there is no running away from. And therefore, we need to keep in mind a number of things. First and foremost, that which is haram in and of itself versus that which is haram because it leads to haram. Secondly, the issue of that which is muntashir, that which is commonly practiced, doesn't take the same ruling as that which is not practiced. And thirdly, the fact that somebody is forced to do something because of social pressure, because of awkwardness, is not the same as somebody who willingly goes out of his way and embraces something. And the last point, the generic rule, which is the most important rule, Allah says in the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Fear Allah as much as you can fear Him, as much as it's possible to fear Him. We cannot reach perfection. We strive as much as we can. So for example, that which is haram lidatihi is drinking. Under no circumstances should you cave under pressure because it's awkward, unless somebody is threatening to kill you, obviously then you're forgiven. Otherwise, that which is haram lidatihi, right? Zina is haram lidatihi, drinking is haram lidatihi. Under no circumstance should you feel awkward and then fall into these things. On the other hand, that which you are pressured socially to do for some maslaha, being in the environment where there's alcohol, it is not the same sin, nowhere near the sin as of course drinking alcohol. So to answer these questions again generically, our sister's asking about wearing scrubs and the forearms exposed and whatnot, and again the response is, look, what can I say? Being in the healthcare system, I understand they have the rules, and frankly the rules are put for a reason. I understand that they want your hands to be constantly washed, so you cannot be wearing stuff here. You're going to put the gloves on all the way there. The scrubs are there because they want to be moving about. So try your best to wear the loosest scrubs that you can. Try your best maybe to get an exception for yourself. And by the way, talk to your bosses. A lot of times the rules might be there, but on a one-on case they might just let you wear a full sleeve or whatnot. If it's not allowed to and they're making they say the rule is going to be applied, then what can I say? Don't live your lifestyle based upon that clothing. And when you're finishing work and go back home, then obviously go more modest. But at that point in time, what else can I say? Fear Allah as much as you can. I'm not going to tell you to give up your career because your forearms are exposed. I'm not going to tell you your whole money is haram. I will say that you should try within your job to try to find as much halal as you can. And if it's not possible, then something like this does not take the same ruling as blatant haram. And by the way, even this issue of the forearms, we find some of the Salaf, Qatada and others, and this again shows the narrow-mindedness. So many of our minor students of knowledge, they're not even aware that many of the earlier scholars literally said that the forearms is not even awrah, because a woman is going to expose them when she's cleaning, when she's even in public buying and selling. There are opinions of this nature from the very past, by the way. And I'm just bringing that up, that you will find always some diversity of thought, and when you find some difference of opinion, then it shows you that it is not as clear-cut haram as other issues. The issue of, for example, gazing upon the opposite gender, once again with utmost respect, you have your standard YouTube ulama. Always everything haram, 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 nothing is ever halal. Ya akhi, go read the books of fiqh and listen to actual fuqaha, not those who have trained with what is the dalil and what is the qawl al-rajih and whatnot. Actual fuqaha, if you read their books of fiqh, you will see that there is a much more nuanced discussion. True, some ulama said all gaze is unconditionally haram unless it is done out of need or necessity. For example, a medical doctor surgery, obviously. True, some ulama said that. But the fact of the matter is, from the very beginning of time, we find many scholars, many fuqaha who said that what is forbidden is the lustful gaze. And when the gaze is not lustful and you're just looking for the sake of looking at the person you're talking to, then that is mubah. It's not. And some said it's makruh but not haram, which is probably the safer opinion. And some said only when he or she is a fitna to look at, i.e. it's a potential fitna. When they become older, then it's not. And some said only when there's shahwa, when there's lust, and when there's no lust, then it becomes permissible. And they have their evidences. Of them is the Quran says to both men and women to lower their gaze. Right? And yet our Prophet ﷺ allowed Aisha to look at the Abyssinians who were playing in the masjid with spears, because everybody understood that, and she's looking at the spear play, and there's no problem in that because it's understood there's no shahwa involved whatsoever. So we have a number of famous ulama of the past, many madhabs have allowed to look upon the opposite gender as long as it is not staring, done out of lust, done for a potential of fitna. If you're just having a conversation, in fact, the default position is that you may look at the face and hands when there is even the slightest need to do so. Our fuqaha have said when a trader buys and sells, he needs to look at the buyer in case an argument happens and the court of laws comes in. He needs to know who he sold it to, or she needs to know who she sold it to. Any thing of this nature, it's not darura, it's not life and death when you sell something, but as the interaction is going to happen, you need to be polite to your customer base. You need to know who your customer is. Everybody knows the difference between being polite and between being flirtatious. Nobody needs to teach you being dignified versus wanting something from the opposite gender. And many fuqaha have allowed the gaze that is non-lustful and the interaction that is decent and dignified, and they have said what is forbidden and what the Quran says to lower your gaze, that means the lustful gaze. And we understand this by the context of the verse. And by the way, again, there are plenty of athar of the Salaf, and that's what really sometimes I have to say does kind of irritate me, that those who claim to follow the Salaf, frankly many of them have never actually read the fatawa of the Salaf, and we have to teach them what they say is their own school. Hassan al-Basri, and by the way, realize early in Islam, Muslims conquered many lands that were non-Muslim lands, and these ladies are not dressed the way that they would be in a fully Islamic society at the time. Al-Hassan al-Basri in Al-Basra, obviously, Al-Hassan al-Basri was asked by merchants that they said, "Inna nabi'u qutun," we are selling cotton. "Fayatina nisa'u ahli dhimma fanara shu'urahunna," that we see the non-Muslim ladies coming and they're not wearing the headscarves and their hairs are flowing. So what can we do? And Hassan al-Basri said, "Laysa bihi ba's," there's no sin in that. What are you going to do? These are your non-Muslim customers. You're not staring with lust. You're just interacting with them. This is Al-Hassan al-Basri. He is not just Salafi. He is the Salaf. So again, with utmost respect to that strand and whatnot, but there is a pragmatic reality. What are you going to do when all the men and women in your office are not following the Sharia in their interactions and their dress code? You follow the Sharia as much as you can, and in your interactions with others, and especially of the opposite gender, you maintain your dignity and you maintain your Islamic morals and whatnot. But in and of itself, to look and to interact and to smile and to make sure you avoid flirtation, inshallah, this is completely fine and permissible. Allah knows your intention, and therefore remain polite and remain dignified. And yes, you may interact in a appropriate manner, but, and I have to be very, very clear here, if there is lust in your heart, if a particular person is causing doubts or shahawat to come, then you need to fear Allah. Allah knows the difference. Allah knows what's in your heart. And because look, again, let's be honest here. Where do all such affairs and fahisha start from? It starts from the gaze, and then the heart starts feeling, and then the flirtation. It all starts from there. So if you notice this in your own self with a particular person, well then that's on you. And you need to maintain and control, and you need to lower with that particular person. But if you are interacting generically with your colleagues, with your office workers, with your bosses and secretaries, and you're being polite and kind and dignified and smiling, and you are not being flirtatious, and in the course of your day, you will look at obviously your people, your clients, your bosses, and you will look at them directly. In and of itself, this is a classical standard position of the fuqaha. This isn't some modern fiqh by Yasir, Qadhi. No, it's classical fiqh. Agreed, there is a difference, and agreed, some fuqaha said all gaze is unconditionally not allowed. But I'm telling you from the very beginning, look at Al-Qadhi Abu Yusuf and look at other statements of the Shafi'i and Hanafi scholars of the past. It is well known, many of them said the gaze that is haram is the lustful gaze. As for the gaze that is not done out of lust, then it is mubah, or some said the max you can say it's makruh, it's best to avoid. And no doubt it is best to avoid. But is it sinful? Does it come under the verse? Many fuqaha said no, it does not come under the verse. And the same goes about being in the presence of alcohol. And I've given a longer fatwa, you can go back to that. There is no question that it is best to avoid being in the same room where alcohol is. But again, how much can you avoid in the corporate lifestyles that many of us are working in? Try your best. And your colleagues should know that you don't like being around alcohol. And you should not attend any meeting where there's alcohol, where the purpose of the meeting is just to socialize and there's nothing of benefit to your job. You know the difference. Sometimes Sometimes your office workers just want to go and have fun, or just want to go and spend the office money for budgeting and whatnot, and there's no benefit to you or your job. Why should you go when there's alcohol there? But sometimes there's a meeting, the boss's boss is coming, the annual year's event is being done, and your presence or lack thereof is a huge deal. In that case, show your presence. Try your best to avoid directly the areas of alcohol. Try your best to, not be directly in the vicinity of the alcohol table, let's say, right? But what are you going to do? Your boss comes up to you, is drinking alcohol. What are you going to do? You're not going to run away. You will talk gently, give what needs to be done, and show your presence, and then leave whenever you are able to leave without causing any issues. There is nothing, inshallah, sinful inherently in being in the same room where there are people that are non-Muslims that are drinking. It's not good, there's no question, and you should try your best to not make this the default and norm. But once again, we have to be realistic in the fatawas we give, and we say your close colleagues and your workers should know that you don't like the presence of alcohol, and they should know that if there's no reason, you'd rather not be there. But they should also recognize and realize that, hey, you're not going to stop your career because somebody else is drinking alcohol. You're not going to enforce the sharia on your boss and your colleagues. It's not going to work that way. So, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Avoid that which is haram in its essence, haram because in and of itself. Never ever justify the explicit haram unless your life is threatened. You should never feel awkward and have to drink alcohol. You should never go to the level of something that is haram in and of itself. But that which leads to the haram, and that which has been shut because it is leading to that, well, if you are forced to do this gray area, don't like it in your heart, do not like it in your heart, do not embrace it as a lifestyle. Do the bare minimum, ask Allah's forgiveness, and do the best that you can to minimize these types of things. And in the end of the day, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me and you for all the sins, major and minor, that we do. May Allah Azza wa Jal guide us all to that which He loves. And until next week, Jazakumullahu khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
فيا ذلي ويا خجلي إذا ما قال لي ربي أما استحييته تعصيني ولا تخشى من العتب وتخفي الذنب عن خلقي وتأبى في الهوى قربي فتب مما جنيت عسى تعود إلى رضا